Thank you. Great job. Thank you so much, everyone. So two quick take-home messages for me. One is that I will quote Michael, who said, people want to take action now. And that's the one that stays with me. And the second thing, yes, detection, it's a cycle. Detection it has to make certain standards, and we need to figure it out how to regulate that. But in the cycle, the important consideration is where to intervene. When there is a cycle, you have different points of intervention where you start making the treatment. So that brings to the segue of the next session about the technology's implementation and the regulation. So stay with that particular thought that this is a cycle. There are problems all around the cycles, but where the technology intervention with respect to the regulation is going to make a difference. And the good thing is that the people are acting upon it. People are using the detection technology and an understanding that there is a problem over there, which is a great start. So it's my great pleasure to invite and introduce Ali Pojaman. He's a PFAS program manager for New Jersey at Veolia North America, to introduce the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I stand between you and lunch, but we'll do our best. I'm just going to introduce quickly Kristen Tedesco from NJDEP, who's really the person you want to hear from today. So I'll be quick. I like the fact when the first few presenters say a lot of the pointers I was already going to make, so I'll make this quicker. But just out of curiosity, how many people here have inline water treatment at their house already? I know you would, yeah, right? All right. So some of the points that were made, I have a private well at my house. I moved to New Jersey 2 years ago from California. I'm originally from Toronto, and I've been in the water industry for 19 years, and for about 18 of those years now, anyone I talk to, I say, I don't care if you live in the Swiss Alps, you probably need some kind of filtration in your house, because you don't know what contaminants are out there that aren't regulated yet. So the people who do have inline treatment, I wonder how many of them actually put it in for PFAS and how many put it in for something else and then ended up hopefully treating PFAS too. RO units usually work really well there. So with that, before I go into this, I just wanted to make a point because Katie Angron made a really good point this morning. I want to impress upon you how difficult it is with PFAS to adapt as we go, how many things we don't know about it, as everyone's seen this morning, how many things we're just learning about and we're just figuring out the cost of it and the depth of the problem. And then imagine how difficult it would be to regulate that and how you'd have to pivot quickly. So with Kristen here and Katie, I just want to take a moment and thank DEP because I don't think we realize how difficult, and they have adapted a lot quicker than any of the other regulators that I've worked with, and I've worked with quite a few states here in North America. So thank you. They truly are trailblazers, as Katie had said. Okay, so I'm going to press the right button. Disclaimer, if you want to take a picture, but you have 1 second. Okay.
Hi. Hi, Hokana.
Oh, okay.
अब 12:20 हो गए हैं. अच्छा, अब उठो.
Adam, if you can hear me, your mic is not muted.
आपका फोन नहीं उठाया, तो अभी चल रही है.
Okay, we'll continue.
तो अब 12:30
So
बजने वाला.
why do we need PFAS?
Please उठो.
Okay, health effect was already talked about this morning. The previous session just talked about it, the limits and everything else. And Dr. Blonbach, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, brought up the half-life. So I'm going to try and make it personal, as Mayor Reggiano said, as quickly as I can. So just looking at long-chain PFOA, PFOS kind of detection levels right now, one of the main reasons it lasts so long on your body is because it looks like a fatty acid. PFAS by itself, in general, long-chain ones anyways, are relatively inert. They don't do anything. They're really hard to get rid of. basically a molecule with a straitjacket on it because of the carbon fluoride bond. And because they look like fatty acid, they get distributed around your body by your blood, and they get put in places where fatty acid is supposed to be. And that messes with a lot of things, including your thyroid receptors. So it's really important that, as they mentioned, we bring everyone on board. And at the end, there was the citizens. You communicate to the citizens. I like to say those are the first people. We're all citizens here. I tell my neighbors, everyone I can all the time. Don't try to scare them, but I try to tell them the reality of it. The more we communicate it, the easier it will be to implement what's about to come. Oh, wrong button, sorry. Okay, so I'm really going to go through some of the experience we've had here at Veolia, implementing this stuff in the last 5 years. As I said, I've only been there for 2 years. I did a lot of the Chrome 6 and TCP stuff in California, so there's similar experiences. Actually, Shen, who's here, he started a bunch of it with the state. But a really cool quote when I was here on Wednesday on the Infrastructure Forum from Maria Lehman. She said, "The obvious isn't." And when it comes to finding the right technology for treatment, the obvious of, oh, this is the right, most efficient way to get rid of it in media and everything isn't the case. In most of our cases, we ended up selecting on 2 main things, and I'll go through that quickly. So just really quickly, we have had 11 sites so far, numbers are increasing that we've implemented. 2 of them are still in phase 1, kind of a temporary treatment, and another 18 projects going ahead. We're well suited in Veolia from a technology and information standpoint. Siavash, who's also on the board of the CTR here with the technology and performance group. We have our water technology group. We have our building services group. We collaborate regularly, so it really helps us foster an internal collaboration. So going quickly through our treatment considerations, most part, when you're looking at state level MCL treatments, you're looking at usually GAC anion exchange. That's what was piloted. That's what's been regulated so far. And obviously a big part of this event here is to bring forth all the additional technologies you've seen and you'll see. And what Kristen's going to talk about is how we can try and implement that as quickly as possible, part of how well they're adapting to it. We look at water quality considerations. So if you have GAC or an exchange, they react poorly to certain things in water, whether it's green sand, chlorine, anything else. So that changes things. And then you look at whether, okay, how much is it going to cost me up front and or how much is it going to cost me long-term for maintenance, so CapEx and OpEx. And then really the last 2, which is the main reason we ended up selecting what technology we did, real estate and wastewater treatment. So will it fit where you want it to fit? And do you need to flush it to waste? Because it's nice to be able to implement it now, but in 2 years, 3 years from now, if there's a wastewater standard coming, and also it's not nice to put PFAS concentrated water back in the land. So if we can't flush it to waste, that rules out GAC and a lot of other smaller sites if there is no sewage line or ability to flush it. So that hence the statement, as long as water quality is not a factor, the biggest considerations so far have been technology. For technology sectors, it's been wastewater and real estate size. Okay, so here's my best attempt as to say why we need technology to assist. It's not always technology first, and I'll explain that in a second. But does anybody know the Fosbury flop? And yeah, yes, New Mexico Olympic Games, Dick Fosbury. He was the first to do the high jump with his back first. I call it the Fosbury flop. We kind of need one of those in PFAS. Someone needs to figure something nobody else has seen before and try it. And that's what the people you saw in the panel before and the panel you see that are trying their best to do. But then how do you actually bring that? It's easy to do the Olympics and say, oh yeah, he won the gold. That's why it's really important, but much harder to bring it to market. And Mayor Vagino brought it up really neatly. It's like, how do we make it personal? With Chrome 6, it was easy. I say Aaron Brockovich, everybody knows what I mean. There was a movie made about it. So if anyone knows any good Hollywood writers and producers, let's get that going. All right, so just really quickly impressing upon you the breadth of this thing. We're about to, in the next 2 years, unless the federal guideline change or state guidelines change, which I don't think they will, put in a ridiculous amount of infrastructure with many small municipalities that have just gotten some funding or are looking for funding and haven't even started yet. That's all water utilities, same regulations, fixed timeline, fixed resources, everybody all at once. It becomes a zero-sum game. right? So technology can help with that, but at the same time, someone wins and someone loses in a zero-sum game. So here's the next part about it. Technology shouldn't be your first go-to either. The first thing I think you should do is look at your people and your processes and your organization and see if you can improve any of that to help extend your life cycles, extend your implementation protocols, anything else you can to make the technology a last requirement. But as I just said, 2 years, and it's only so much money to go around. So with that, the alignment, I did this presentation at Jersey Waterworks, and I'm part of I co-chaired a committee with Amy, who's going to speak to you guys more about it this afternoon, for PFAS. And we talked about, hey, we have all these regulatory compliance, environmental protection, and operational efficiency, and we got to get them all aligned. And I was like, I don't know, because sometimes, operational efficiency is costly, environmental protection is costly, and regulatory compliance, like they will interact with each other and overlap with each other. So the idea wasn't that, but let's add to it as a utility how you can implement that project. Let's add to it the concept of budget, time, and quality. And can you make all those aligned? So the answer was, well, you can't necessarily align all of them because all the arrows are going everywhere, but you can at least bring a central location where everybody can collaborate and work together, and hence the CTR, the CIP that's formed here, hence the committee that we've got that we're working on as well. We are collaborating. We're trying to share as much information as possible. Well, let's add to that the budget, time, and quality as well. How can you make it in time, good quality, and keep the cost low? And notice there's no errors going out of time. Time isn't going to wait around for you. It's this fixed. The budget is somewhat fixed to a certain degree for some municipalities. They only have so much money. So that's why technology can be very critical. So as I finish off, I'll leave you with this. That's the reason it's really good to attend this. Tell your staff to attend as many of these as they can, get involved as much as they can, because there's so much we don't know that we don't know. You turn over every stone. That's what the researchers do. But I'm hoping that we can help them figure pathways to get municipalities and trying to implement these technologies. And that's what Kristen is going to talk about. With that, as I said, to collaborate, this is my information. Please reach out to me. I'll cover my Veolia tag. You can just reach out to me as Ali with Jersey Waterworks, for example. And feel free to ask any questions you have. I'm here available all the time. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Kristen. And thank you so much.
Okay, good afternoon. So I'm Kristen Tedesco. I'm from the Division of Water Supply and Geoscience at NJDEP. So in our division, our mission is to ensure New Jersey's water supply is adequate, reliable, safe, and available for the future based on sound science. My program is specifically the half of our division that deals with the safe drinking water programs. So when we talk about PFAS, just to put it in context, that's the regulation and licensing of licensed operators that we also handle licensing for wastewater operators that are responsible for managing your PFAS treatment. We handle all the permits for PFAS treatment, and we handle and manage all the data that comes in from the water systems to make sure they're meeting all of these standards. So this is just a summary to date of PFAS violations and some of the progress we've seen in New Jersey. So as I believe Katie noted this morning, and as a number of speakers have noted, we're ahead nationally in terms of PFAS. We had a regulation prior to anything being done by EPA. So while other states are just now trying to address the problem, if you go back to, and I only went back a few years here, but back to 2022, you can see the orange is the number of violations, and the blue is the number of systems with PFAS treatment installed, and you can see how the number of treatment installations is going up and the number of violations is going down. Only thing I want to note here, or I guess two things I want to note here, is this is based on the current New Jersey MCLs. So there's currently a lower EPA standard out there, so we expect that to change these numbers going forward, and have already taken steps with a lot of the water systems that are anticipated to exceed especially the larger water systems, to try to address that and try to get out ahead of the EPA regulation and make sure people are putting a plan in place. The other thing here is the number of violations is not based on like system. It's not a one-to-one ratio, right? So saw Rich speak earlier. Ridgewood has multiple entry points. They get a different violation for every single one of those entry points. So when you look at those orange numbers, that's reflective of the fact that water systems have more than one well, more than one point of entry, and they have to provide treatment at all of those different points to be into compliance and to make sure that we're providing safe drinking water. Okay, this slide has a lot of words on it, but I put this up here just to note that determining PFAS treatment is not one size fits all. I think we all recognize that. Water systems with those different points of entry don't even use the same treatment at every point of entry because it's very specific to water chemistry, site considerations, other things. From a regulatory perspective, like we primarily see treatment as either GAC or anion exchange for the smaller systems. That's what's coming in right now is primarily those two. And that has to do, for AIX, it has to do, with spacing considerations. GAC, a lot of people appreciate the ability to backwash, to be able to backwash the media. So there's lots that goes into consideration in that regard. We are, though, also seeing some novel absorbents. We've done a couple permits for novel absorbents, and I'm going to talk at the end about a couple situations regarding that because there's a recognition that GAC doesn't necessarily work for everybody, right? Anion exchange doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And because it's so site-specific, we've had to adopt like our processes internally at the DEP to help facilitate treatment and to work more collaboratively with water systems to address next steps to ensure the public is provided with safe drinking water. So this is a review, just a really quick snapshot of our current treatment technology process. So historically, in our safe drinking water program, we've had a standard permit, right? Someone submits the permit. It has like pretty typical conditions. It's a pretty straightforward process. What we've seen, though, especially with PFAS, is as the technology is developing, a standard, GAC might not work for everyone, that we get more requests for media that might not have been used previously in a New Jersey water system. Fortunately, there are some other states that have examples of media that wasn't used in New Jersey, but has been used elsewhere. And then there's also been requests for new treatment technology that hasn't been used elsewhere. So in those cases, we've had to look towards pilot testing, literature searches, things of that nature in our permitting process to make sure, A, that we have confidence that these technologies, when they're permitted, are meeting like the standards and the intent of our regulations. And then also making sure that we understand the data, just from the engineers that work in my program and working collaboratively with the engineers that work with all the water systems to figure out and make the decisions that are best protective of public health. The regulatory perspective, we don't make recommendations on treatment for the water systems specifically. We rely on their staff to do that, but we will evaluate it in terms of those regulatory benchmarks and just experience with all the permits that we've processed to date. So we try to have that collaborative relationship from the start. And these just go through some of the scenarios. So this is it's just a graphic that I wanted to put up quickly. It's from an AWWA evaluation framework that was done in conjunction with some of the states and AWWA. And what we're seeing, especially for new treatment, and particularly for treatment that's not necessarily, used or that's doesn't have a long history in New Jersey, you can do anything from, right, a desktop study, which, very small, like, a rapid scale, small column test, something very basic. You could do bench scale testing all the way to like full scale pilot testing. And what the water systems have to weigh and what we at DEP have to weigh is the accuracy in the results. The more data you gather, the more we have information to show whether that treatment is going to be protective, the evaluation timeline, and the evaluation cost. I thought it was, someone mentioned the SRF program cost is like a definitive factor that we consider at the state in terms of the cost for all of these water systems to put on PFAS treatment. And then also recognizing that the financial situation of all the water systems across the state is not the same. There's a number of small and disadvantaged communities that don't always have those resources. So this just represents some of those decision points that we do as a state. As I mentioned, we try very hard to work with water systems at the start. We try to initiate that dialogue before they come in for a permit, actually long before they come in for a permit. We encourage pilot studies where there's uncertainty, where water systems are not sure. Maybe you're between two technologies. We're working right now. We have a number of pilot studies for our large surface water systems just because of the complexity and the size of those treatment plants. But we use this in practice with a number of small systems as well, particularly, like I said, where space is limited or they might be looking at a novel absorbent or a technology that hasn't been used. And some examples of the results expected are up there, right? Media life, treatment effectiveness. And this allows us to get ahead of the actual permit. So we're getting all this data. The water system is getting all this data. We have this dialogue with the water systems. And that way, by the time the permit comes in, we've asked a lot of questions, to ensure that there's not maybe gaps or other things that don't align with what the regulatory requirements say or what we interpret them to mean, just to make sure that the money is invested by the water systems is going to an end product that accomplishes the ultimate goal. So benefits of a pilot study. Water systems have two routes that they can go for a pilot study. So if the pilot study is discharging the treated water back into the water system for potable use, in that case, they need a temporary treatment approval from us. It's basically a smaller version or a pre-step to a full-scale permit. And that's because, people are ultimately drinking this water. So we have some enhanced monitoring requirements associated with a temporary treatment approval, but it's a good way to look at it case by case and see, hey, is this really going to work for my system? If the water system is discharging to a sewer, then they don't necessarily require that temporary treatment approval. But again, we always encourage water systems and engineers to reach out, particularly to our Bureau of Water System Engineering. You can reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with some of the managers that are under me to discuss the study with the permitting team. And again, make sure that we're doing everything we can so that when we get the permit, we can facilitate the approval and the ultimate installation of treatment. This is some guidance on pilot studies. So some of this was on some of the notes on the earlier slide, but we do recommend pilot studies if any design criteria outside industry standards, right? That could be something like the loading rate or any challenge. So I mentioned surface water, groundwater under the direct influence of surface water, or if you have water quality that's exhibiting high TDS or something else that can directly impact treatment. We always recommend in that case. But again, part of those decision-making processes are with the water system and not the state. We're going based on our experience and recommending what we think helps facilitate the process and move it more quickly through. We require a pilot study predominantly with treatment technologies that have not been approved before, right? So that, and especially where there's not a lot of case studies, maybe in other states that demonstrate the effectiveness, in that case will typically require a pilot study. And then permanent versus temporary treatment approval. So as I mentioned, we have these temporary treatment approval process. Usually our general time frame for a temporary treatment approval is about a year, but we've extended it in a number of cases just based on what the water system is trying to accomplish. And this has some of those timeframes. So the review timeframes are a little bit shorter, but it helps also then facilitate, again, that permanent installation of treatment because we've done a review, we have a lot of that data. We can use it just to, if you're seeing good results from your temporary treatment approval, we can use that to say, okay, this makes sense to do a permanent installation. So I think there's like a misconception sometimes with the permits that I'm going to submit my permit and the state's going to review it and stamp it and it's fine. But this way it's a collaborative process because PFAS is so different than some of the contaminants we've historically regulated. And then I think I just said this, results from the pilot studies can vary. So I think the only thing I'll note on the slide is what it says at the bottom, that you can transition to a full-scale pilot, especially if your original pilot study was not full-scale. So we can do like a temporary treatment approval out of that. There's a lot of steps here, depending on whether you did a bench study, you know, a pilot study, full-scale, whatever you're doing. So there's a number of avenues that water systems can go and can consider in collaboration with the DEP. Okay. Having said all of that, I just wanted to highlight a couple examples that I noted on this slide, just to get an idea of some of what water systems are doing in the state of New Jersey. So the first one there was a small water system up north that had used anion exchange, but they had high TDS and high manganese. So they were seeing that the AX media was fouling because of their water quality. So they requested to change the media within the vessels to Dexorb, something that's not more commonly used right now, currently in New Jersey. We asked for case studies, which they did provide us. The case studies had water that was similar water quality, which is something we look at when we're considering the applicability of a case study to a permit we're reviewing. And then we requested that they submit a temporary treatment approval. It's my understanding that the vessels were in lead lag and they did not have the space. Someone used to tell me that engineering comes down to space and money and that everything else is just, you know, ancillary. But they did not have the space to do heavy pretreatment in this case. So that was part of why they went to Dexorb. But they first put Dexorb in the lead vessel, and then they eventually changed it in the lag media. So that gave them an opportunity to see how it was performing, to do some extra monitoring, and that's something they worked with the state in taking a look at. The second one there is electrostatic removal of PFAS. So this is something we're doing with staff that were previously part of EPA's Office of Research and Development. So even though that's disbanded to a degree, the staff are still there within their program areas. And so with the electrostatic, they're using the RO concentrate, trying to treat that, and then trying to do like reverse osmosis on the back end. So we're still relatively early in this study, but it's, again, like a technology that we haven't really used in practice, and trying to consider like if this will be effective for this particular water system, just due to, you know, considerations on the part of on their part. And they did do a bench study that was submitted to the Bureau as part of the electrostatic removal. So that's part of what happened there. The GAC filter beds at a lower empty bed contact time. So we historically have always for GAC required 20 minutes of empty bed contact time. But with the large surface water systems coming in for permits in New Jersey and looking at, you know, spacing and various other factors, some of them have found, just because the volumes these plants have produced, that it's not realistic to meet 20 minutes of empty bed contact time. So they're doing pilot studies to demonstrate that removal is effective at a lower empty bed contact time. And we have routine meetings with a number of them to try to monitor the data and make sure that it is making sense. And then the last one, just make sure I don't get the systems mixed up. The last one was similar to the first example, that a system had requested an alternate, I think they used Fluorosorb in the last example, but they were having similar problems with the AIX fouling due to their water quality characteristics. And so what they wound up using was a non-selective AIX in their lead vessel. They kind of called it like their sacrificial vessel to address some of the loading from the TDS. And then that way they were able to more effectively like remove their PFAS with their lag vessel. So they also did a temporary treatment approval to track and did a lot of monitoring to track the PFAS removal across both of across their beds. But these are just examples of how systems have used these benchtop pilot studies and other analysis to look at this new technology. So, you know, from a state perspective, we have a number of research scientists and engineers that work with me that try to monitor all the technology. I found the last presentation very interesting because I'm continuously trying to look at what's out there and what's coming up, because this is the process that we try to use to permit everything that's coming up and everything that's on the horizon. And we are always trying to coordinate with the water systems and EPA in terms of, is there a system that some of this new technology like would be effective at and is a good candidate to use at? So I am happy to speak today because I think like these are the discussions that we need to have, especially since New Jersey is kind of in that spotlight and ahead, is we're hitting some of these questions before some of the other states, and it's up to us to really figure out how to address them. And then I think the next step, and I think Ali touched on it very briefly, is like that O&M, because now we're going to get into all these systems, have this PFAS treatment in place. We're going to look at media life, at regeneration of carbon, like all of these steps. We have an aging operator workforce. And so one of the challenges we'll be looking at going forward is not just the permitting thing, although that will continue to be a focus, but the operational considerations like as a whole and what it means long-term for New Jersey, especially as we start to hit the deadlines with the EPA federal regulations and we start to see more systems that are triggering these MCLs. This is my contact information. We have a lot of forms for PFAS related to our permitting process, but you can always reach out to me. I think the V, it's .gov, got cut off by the DEP logo. So, but you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to direct you to talk to anyone on our staff, especially if you have a system specific question. So I think that's all I have, but thank you.
Kristen. So just really quickly, before there's any questions, I think the biggest key takeaway I've always had when I've talked to anyone from the DP is please reach out to them early and often. They're there to help. They'll show you new technologies that they're seeing in other systems that could help you. So if there's any questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a handful of questions that have come in here, and I'm going to start with a good one. I'm not sure we have answers. Does DEP have dollars to help fund pilot studies?
So we mentioned the SRF program. So we do have a number of like planning and design options like through our SRF. We also get a number of grants that are specific to small systems. So depending on the size of your system, particularly, like I said, SRF might be more applicable for a larger system, but for a very small system, they have federal grants that can cover planning and design, can do assessments, things like that. So we would be able to potentially cover some of those if they meet that criteria. So yes, and you can also reach out to me with questions about the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which covers all of those grants, all of our technical assistance programs, all of our loans, and I can always put you into contact with some of our other staff that handle that.
So I have one more question here, but this is for both of you. It hits on both topics. So earlier it was recommended that everybody get a home unit to filter. There's a lot of treatment options. What treatment do you think is best?
Good question. RO probably is the one that I've seen. And where's Chen? Is he nodding? Okay, sorry. RO would be probably the best for personal home use. And I would get a softener to protect your RO unit, especially if you have a well like mine. I'll tell you a joke. I'm buying a new house 2 years ago. that all my information is on the application and everything else. And the lawyer calls the day before closing. It's like, the well test came back positive for something called PFAS. Do you know anything about that? And so, yeah, that's something I would say is the first place I would start. But if you're specifically looking for PFAS, there's much cheaper options than that. Obviously, as mentioned by Florzor Group, and there's other ones to look for.
And this might be a question more for DEP side. Is there a list of pre-approved media?
We have a list of media that we've used in previous permits, but so that I would be able to provide. We don't have pre-approved in the sense that, like I mentioned, we're open to media we have not seen before. We're open to media that's been used in other states. That's part of why we have some of these requirements. So if anyone's interested in the list of what we have approved in state, I'm happy to provide that. You can just send me an email.
Okay.
Good.